The hall was grander than anything Emma Collins had ever stepped into. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over rows of velvet chairs, their deep red fabric contrasting against the polished marble floors. The scent of expensive cologne and fresh roses filled the air as the city's elite gathered for the evening auction. Businessmen in tailored suits and women draped in diamonds filled the room, their laughter polite, their eyes sharp with anticipation for rare treasures soon to be unveiled. Emma, however, did not belong there. Her dress was plain and worn, her shoes slightly scuffed, and her posture one of quiet humility rather than entitlement. She hadn't come to bid, nor to mingle among the wealthy. She was only there because her daughter's school had asked her to deliver a set of documents to the auction house director. After finishing the errand, curiosity had tugged her forward, leading her to slip into the back row of the grand hall just as the event began. She told herself she would watch for a few minutes, then leave. The auctioneer's voice thundered as one item after another was introduced, a rare painting, a set of antique china, a diamond brooch that fetched an astonishing price within seconds. Emma sat silently, her heart thudding at the sheer wealth being exchanged around her. These people tossed around thousands of dollars the way she counted every cent at the grocery store. She thought of her daughter, Lily, and the half-empty fridge at home. A pang of guilt struck her. She didn't belong in this world, and yet, for some reason, she couldn't tear herself away. Then the next item was unveiled. The auctioneer held up a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a gold watch that gleamed under the lights. It wasn't just any watch, it was vintage, its face marked with delicate etchings, and on the back, engraved initials gleamed faintly, Jr. The audience murmured in appreciation, whispers of its craftsmanship and history rippling through the room. But Emma's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. Her chest tightened as memories crashed over her like a wave. She had seen that watch before, long ago, when she was a child. She remembered the way her father, James Rowan, used to slip it onto his wrist every morning, tapping the glass face with a fond smile as if it were a trusted friend. He had once told her it would be hers one day, a keepsake to remind her of him always. But when life had fallen apart, when debts had piled up and illness had consumed their family, the watch had been lost, sold or taken, she never knew. Until now. Her lips parted, and before she could stop herself, she whispered, "That's my dad's watch." The words were soft, not meant for anyone else. Yet in the hush that followed the auctioneer's announcement of the opening bid, her voice carried just far enough. At the front row, a tall man in a sleek black suit lifted his paddle to bid. His name was Alexander Grant, a self-made millionaire with a reputation for being as ruthless in business as he was precise in judgment. But as his hand stilled in midair, his head turned, and his piercing gaze locked on the young woman in the back row. The room remained silent, the auctioneer frozen in confusion, as Alexander lowered his paddle slowly, his eyes narrowing at the whisper that had stopped him cold. Emma's cheeks burned the moment she realized her whisper had reached the ears of others. She sank lower into her seat, hoping the crowd would dismiss her words as the ramblings of someone out of place. But the sharp gaze of Alexander Grant cut through the distance, pinning her where she sat. The auctioneer faltered, hesitated, and then leaned toward Alexander when the businessman raised his hand, not for another bid, but to quietly request the item be removed from the stage. Confusion rippled through the audience, murmurs rising in protest, yet no one dared question him. When Alexander Grant spoke, people listened. Within seconds, the velvet box was carried away, and the watch was no longer up for bidding. Emma's heart pounded with a mixture of anger and dread. Why would he, a man who could buy anything, take away the one relic of her father she had seen in years? She wanted to leave, to run before anyone asked questions, but before she could rise, Alexander was already striding down the aisle toward her. He moved with the kind of authority that made people instinctively step aside, his tall frame and tailored suit commanding attention. When he stopped before her row, Emma gripped her handbag tightly, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes on her. "What did you just say?" His voice was low, controlled, but there was a sharpness in it that demanded honesty. Emma's throat went dry. She wanted to tell him it was nothing, that he had misheard, but her heart wouldn't let her. With trembling lips, she answered, "That watch, it belonged to my father. His initials were James Rowan. I don't know how it ended up here, but it was his." For a long moment, Alexander simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. But inside, a storm was raging. The name James Rowan was not one he could forget. Years ago, in the ruthless climb to wealth, Alexander had nearly lost everything. A hostile takeover, a betrayal by his own business partner, and debts that threatened to destroy his future had left him broken. And it was James Rowan, a man of quiet honor, who had stepped in to protect him. James had put his own resources and reputation on the line to shield Alexander from ruin. But then, as quickly as he had appeared, James vanished. Rumors spread that he had fled, betrayed by those he trusted. Alexander had searched for him, wanting to repay the debt, but he had disappeared like smoke. And now, here was this young woman, with the same eyes, the same voice softened by weariness, whispering his name in connection to a watch Alexander himself had seen James wear. Where is he now? Alexander's voice broke slightly despite his best attempt to remain composed. Emma looked down at her lap, blinking back the sting of tears. He passed away 10 years ago. All I have left are memories, and the stories he told me. That watch should have been mine, but when we lost everything, it disappeared. Her words hung heavy in the air, and Alexander felt the full weight of guilt pressing into him. Fate had placed before him not just a relic of his past but the daughter of the man to whom he owed everything. Emma sat across from Alexander Grant in a room that looked more like a palace than an office. The walls were lined with books bound in leather, and floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glittering skyline of the city. She felt out of place, clutching her worn handbag on her lap, her heart still racing from the whirlwind of events at the auction. Alexander had insisted she meet him privately, and though her instincts told her to decline, something in his tone, something almost desperate, had made her agree. Now, as she sat there, she felt both nervous and strangely curious about what he wanted from her. Alexander leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly on the polished mahogany desk. For the first time in years, his usual air of absolute confidence seemed cracked. "Your father," he began slowly, "was not just any man. James Rowan, he was the one who saved me when I was on the edge of ruin." He paused, his voice roughening as memories surfaced. "I was a young man, reckless and ambitious. My company was collapsing, my name was tainted, and I was drowning in debts that would have destroyed me. Everyone turned their backs, except your father. He put himself at risk, used what little he had, and shielded me from destruction." Emma's eyes widened as she listened. She had grown up knowing her father was a good man, but he had never spoken of helping anyone as powerful as Alexander Grant. To her, James Rowan had always been just her gentle father, a man who worked tirelessly and loved his family with quiet devotion. Hearing this stranger tell her that her father had shaped the destiny of one of the wealthiest men in the city was overwhelming. "He never told me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He never said anything about you." Alexander's expression darkened. "Because he disappeared before I could ever thank him. I searched for him. For years, I tried to find James, but it was as if he had vanished into thin air. And now I learn that he's been gone for a decade." He leaned back in his chair, his chest rising and falling heavily. "And all this time, his family, his daughter, was struggling, while I lived off the fortune he preserved for me." Emma's throat tightened with emotion, torn between pride in her father's legacy and the bitterness of what her family had endured. She spoke quietly, almost ashamed. "After he passed, it was just my mother and me. We lost our home. She fell sick not long after, and then, it was just me and my daughter. I work 2 jobs, Mr. Grant. I barely manage rent. That watch, it's the last piece of him I thought I'd never see again." Silence filled the room, heavy and unspoken, as Alexander's guilt deepened. He reached into the drawer, pulled out the velvet box, and slid it across the desk toward her. "This belongs to you," he said firmly. But not just this. Everything I should have given him. I will give to you. His voice shook with conviction. I owe your father a debt that can never be repaid. But I can start by honoring him, through you. Emma stared at the velvet box on the desk, her father's watch glinting faintly under the soft office light. For a long moment, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It felt surreal, as though time itself had folded back to place a piece of her past in her hands. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she lifted the watch and traced the familiar initials, Jr. Her father's presence washed over her, and tears blurred her vision. He always said this would be mine one day, she whispered, her voice breaking. I thought it was gone forever. Alexander leaned forward, his expression uncharacteristically gentle. Emma, your father was a man of integrity. He sacrificed for others in ways few would understand. I built an empire because of him, yet I never had the chance to repay what I owed. I can't change the past, but I can ensure his daughter and granddaughter never struggle again. His words carried the weight of a vow, not just an offer. For the first time, Emma saw beyond the polished exterior of the businessman. She saw a man carrying guilt, a man searching for redemption. Emma shook her head slightly, torn between pride and practicality. I didn't come here for charity, Mr. Grant. I've managed this far on my own. My daughter, she looks up to me. If I suddenly accept help from a man like you, what does that teach her? That we can't stand on our own. Her words were steady, though her hands clutched the watch as if it were life itself. Alexander's eyes softened, and he leaned back, his voice quieter. No, Emma. It teaches her that sometimes strength is knowing when to accept what is rightfully yours. This isn't charity. This is your father's legacy. What I offer is not pity, it's a continuation of the bond he and I shared. His words struck deep, and Emma felt her resistance waver. She thought of Lily's worn-out shoes, the bills that kept piling up, and the nights she cried silently, unsure how much longer she could keep fighting alone. Finally, she nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Then I'll accept, not for me, but for Lily. If this is truly my father's legacy, then she deserves to know it. Alexander smiled faintly, the weight on his shoulders easing for the first time in years. Good. Because I intend to make sure she never forgets the name James Rowan, or the honor of the man he was. Later that evening, Emma walked out of the towering building with Lily's small hand in hers and her father's watch on her wrist. The city lights glowed around them, but for the first time in years, the future didn't feel dark and uncertain, it felt bright, alive, and filled with possibility. From the top-floor window, Alexander watched them disappear into the night, silently vowing that James Rowan's memory would live on through the family he left behind. Emma had whispered the truth in a crowded auction room, and in that single whisper, she had not only reclaimed her father's watch but also rewritten the course of her and her daughter's lives.